A reading from the Gospel according to John. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, in the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill, so the sisters sent a message to Jesus. "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after hearing that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and you are going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was merely referring to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, and the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she might be going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and the stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to him, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. Here ends the reading from God's word.
Well, today we will continue. We have 2 more sermons or talks, conversations around the 12 steps. And so I'm Houston and I'm codependent. I really do appreciate when people ask me questions and want a dialogue. Somebody asked, well, what is codependency? The joke that we like to say is that a codependent, when they die, it's always somebody else's life that flashes before their eyes. Codependents are people who are very wrapped up with other people and their agendas and what other people are about. And that's one of the major issues. It's quite elaborate, but that's just a brief. And if you want some more, can guide you to places and more information. So if you will, join me in as we say the 12 steps. 1, we admit we are powerless over, that our lives had become unmanageable. Come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives to care of God as we understand God. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact natures of our wrongs. We are entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. Made a list of all persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends of them all. Made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So today we start with step 9, making direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, a passage of scripture that might help us is found in Proverbs, part of our wisdom. I found this artwork that says, a word rightly spoken is in due season, is like the apples of gold setting in silver. But then there's the added verse afterward. It's a golden ring, an ornament of finest gold, such as a wise apology to an attentive ear. That it is a time of great wisdom to figure out when and who you talk to, when you make amends. Richard Ward talks about the skillful means that you come to this step. And when I thought about it, all I could do was thinking about my learning how to make pound cake. Now, y'all hang out with me long enough, y'all know that my mama is the greatest pound cake maker in the world. Sorry, nobody else compares to my mama's. And so, as a little kid, well, not so little, I was probably in elementary school, I decided I was going to surprise my mother and make our weekly pound cake. My mother had to be gone most of Saturday morning, so I got up. I don't know where anybody else was, but I was pretty well left alone, and I went in there and I made a pound cake. I got the recipe in and threw everything into the bowl, and I put it in the oven, and it flopped. So I quickly cleaned up everything, threw everything away in the trash can, tried to hide the evidence. Well, later that afternoon, my mother came down to my room, and she said, Houston, did you try to do something this morning? Well, I mean, when you see 6 eggs missing out of the refrigerator, it's a good sign. My mama's not stupid. You know, my mom was a chemist. I got the best chemistry lesson that afternoon as she explained to me, because she asked me, she said, well, what did you do? And see, I had just thrown all the eggs in, the butter and the sugar and the flour, and just threw everything in. And Mother says, oh, no. There's chemical reactions that have to happen. It's the only chemistry lesson I have ever cared about in my life. But she taught me the skill of making a pound cake. You know, things sort of have to happen a certain way. And so when it comes to this step of trying to make amends, you sort of carefully have to figure out how you're going to do this. Sometimes if you misstep or you put it all in the wrong way, it just becomes a disaster. You know, it's really interesting how so often we spend so much time, we worship Jesus. Did Jesus ever ask us to worship? No, Jesus said, follow me. So we have to follow Jesus' example, and we can see examples in his life when he was trying to make amends with people, trying to help them. See, step 9 is telling us how to use skillful means to both protect our own humanity and to liberate the humanity of others. You know, you have to be sort of careful about when you try to make amends. You know, blurting out that you had done something really wrong with another person, and then, that other person's spouse is standing there, that might not be the best time to do that. You know? See, one of our problems about this step is we do have a love of gossip. You know? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I have a deep suspicion so many in this room are going to raise their hand that we like gossip. We want to hear this and that. Half our magazines, half our television shows, we'd be in deep trouble if we didn't have somebody to be talking about. But gossip's not a right, but a major obstacle to human love and spiritual wisdom. One of my churches, when I first got out of seminary, had a prayer chain. A prayer chain. We knew what it was. So the senior minister and I decided that we were going to set something out. And I'll never forget when this person called. It can be male and female. We're not going to trash either gender. But this person called and, they were drilling. Well, what? I need to know more information so I can pray. So we sort of figured out where that chain of gossip was working in this church. And it can be so detrimental. And so we need to be fear of that. Not everyone has the right to know everything. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. To not know some things. There's a book that I finished up this week by Philip Gulley. He was the gentleman that wrote the book that I based last Lenten series on, Spice Up Your Spiritual Life. He's a Quaker, and twice in this book he had this quote from William Penn: "True godliness does not turn men out of the world, but enables them to live better in it and excites their endeavors to mend it." You know, I think that's what the church really needs to be about, is finding ways to make amends, trying to find ways to mend. You know, thank God this church does not have the conflict that I've had in other interims in my life. But you know, we have to find ways that we mend, we let go of things that harm us, that harm ourselves and harm our brothers and sisters. And truly, I think this is the call of the church, is to be busy about mending. My mantra in life, and I don't know if I've ever told this story, is, have I ever told you about tikkun olam, the Hebrew phrase to mend the world? Have I not told y'all that story? See, I'm joking. I look back over at Corey because at one of my churches, my musician paid very close attention to my sermons. And one Sunday, we were walking out, and he says, "You know, you told that story already once." I looked over at him. I said, "I'm leaving. I don't like to repeat." The phrase tikkun olam is Hebrew, and I learned it at the feet of a Holocaust survivor. I found out that this woman was going to be speaking, and I literally got all my juniors and seniors out of high school and carried them to the college to go be there. We were in a nice sort of lounge kind of space, and the room was absolutely packed, and I literally ended up sitting at her feet. And she told us the horrors that she had faced in Auschwitz. And then every once in a while she would say that phrase. And finally a young lady in the room asked her, says, "What does that mean, tikkun olam?" She said, "It's Hebrew, to mend the world." And at that moment I got my mantra. That's what I'm about. That's what I hope everything about my life is about, mending the world. And we need as the church to be that way. Now let me finish the circle, because about 10 years later I was teaching Our Whole Lives to a Jewish congregation. And I always end teaching Our Whole Lives by telling about this woman. And this woman in the room burst out in tears. And it was her granddaughter. And so we know that her grandmother still lives, because I will tell her story to the end of my life. So be busy about mending. And this step is here to remind us about that. Step 10 is about continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. Now, sometimes you sort of feel, is this an overkill? Aren't we done with this? Can't we just get on? But no, it's never over. Irma Bombeck has that great saying, "Guilt, the gift that keeps on giving." You know, the step is really not about trashing people or hurting people. It's not a negative threat. It's a positive allure, a promise, an invitation. What it's doing is trying to help us to be conscious, to stay awake. If you really study all the world religions, they have this common theme of be awake, be aware. See, you know, we are consumers by training and habit, and which is exactly why we have such a problem with addiction. We're just so used to taking everything in and just consuming without being a producer. Wisely, step 10 does not emphasize a moral inventory which becomes too self-absorbed and self-critical, but it speaks of a personal inventory. In other words, just watch yourself objectively, calmly, and with compassion. You know, life is very fragile. We have to find a way to treat ourselves and treat our fellow brothers and sisters with care. And that's a lesson I really started learning when I was working this 10th step. I found this quote just recently. Step 10 incorporates the process we've been going through in steps 4 through 9. We do not work this step to punish ourselves, to hold ourselves under a constant critical and demeaning microscope. We do it to maintain self-esteem and harmony in our relationships with ourselves and others. We do it to stay on track. That's from Melanie Beatty. I've shared some of this at I think on a Wednesday night, but I'll go ahead and share it with all of y'all. One Tuesday I was coming into work, and I normally turn, right off the main, and I come up the back way up in the circular drive. And right as I was going to turn, there was a FedEx truck coming on the side that's going to go down this way on Main Street. So I had to pause, and the car right behind me, honked. Just like that, I sent that person an Ohio blessing. Just, no pause, no nothing. Just, here it came flying up. I pulled up and I went. And I'm looking around. I'm here at work. I'm the minister here. I had to do a step 10 real quick. I know it wasn't right. It shouldn't have done it. And I've now realized what I should have done is just jumped out of the car and bowed to the person. But it reminds me about being gentle to myself as I'm learning to be gentle with my brothers and sisters. It really boils down to that we're being kind. Life is a way too short to spend another day at war with yourself. And I think that's what this step's about. It's a way to bring healing into yourself, and of course that just spreads to your brothers and sisters. It's worthy of our time. It's worthy of our effort. So let us conclude by saying the serenity prayer. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I should, to know the difference. Amen.